Let's look at retiring in 2024, or at the very least, starting the planning process for how you would go about early retirement and living a life that more matches what you want to do rather than working for someone else. If you want to retire in 2024, you could use the services of a wealth planner, but that might cost you upwards of £1,500. So I'd recommend you do a bit of your own research and analysis and empower yourself to take control of things. It's really important to define retirement. By retirement, what I mean is that there's no organization that has a draw on your time and a contract that says you've got to come into the office on these days. So when you retire, you can wake up on a sunny June morning and just go to the beach or sit out in your garden reading a book. But then other days, you can be working on your own sort of business or your own passion that can make you money. You can be teaching others, or you can be working in a more meaningful way in the local community and doing all kinds of things where money isn't the prime objective and you're actually getting something meaningful from this flexible work that you do on your own terms. So retirement doesn't have to mean income equals zero. It just means you're much more doing things on your own terms. Another reason to retire in 2024 is that potentially your work isn't really giving you the enjoyment that it used to, and it could actually be sapping away at your self-esteem even, because you might find that there's more and more pressures on you in the work environment, and that the environment is changing and it's not really suiting the sort of life that you want to live. And that's maybe a cue to say, well, I need to give up chasing money and start doing something that would truly give me fulfillment and enjoyment in life. So if you're like me, you don't really like planning so much because you put all this effort in to do a plan or a to-do list, and then you feel worse because you haven't done what's on the list because life got in the way and you wish you just never come up with a list in the first place. Whereas unfortunately, you just kind of need to eat the frog, get through it all, and then you've got much greater clarity around what's going on. So one reason to plan is that you don't know how much quality time you've got left in life. And there might be a sweet spot where you have limited responsibilities in terms of things like grandchildren or aging parents, and that is the best time to, say, go to Australia for 2 months and just travel around and live a carefree life and a holiday that you'll remember forever. You might have plans to do things in the future, but often it's a good idea to actually bring forward those plans so you're doing it sooner rather than later. One example is that in 2024, I'm going to Boracay off the Philippines. Now, I think that with Boracay, two things are going to happen going into the future. Either it's going to become a market resort and it's going to cost a lot more money to go there, or it's going to stay relatively inexpensive, but there's just going to be more and more people on the beach, and it's just going to become like Benidorm, but in the Far East. So really, the time to go is now rather than waiting for either the island to become a bit more spoilt by excessive tourism or for prices to rise. So rather than saying, oh, hey, I'll do that when I'm 60 or when I'm 70, you should bring forward the plans and really enjoy them now. One problem with planning is long-term uncertainty, but the issue is that the uncertainty is always there. So you've really just got to kind of live with it and get on with it. So if you're uncertain about things like stock market returns, the best thing to do is to have a strategy to deal with it, which could be to have a cash buffer or an alternative investment other than equities that you can dip into when there are poor stock market returns. And once you've got that sorted out, both in terms of on a spreadsheet and then mentally in your own mind, then I think you can move forward with a bit more certainty around your finances. A lot of people overestimate their expenditure in retirement. So when you've retired, you're probably not paying any money towards a mortgage, not paying any money towards your children so much, not saving any money either. So the actual expenditure can be quite low. And then also over time, that expenditure doesn't necessarily have to grow because you'll probably tick off items on your bucket list and do the exciting things when you're younger. Then as you get older, you settle a bit more into routine and the costs will ultimately come down over time, even after allowing for inflation. Income tax in your first few years of retirement could potentially be zero because you could be living off your ISA or from tax-free cash from your pensions. And I don't mean necessarily taking all the tax-free cash from a pension in a lump sum in a 12-month period, but you can spread it over a few years and achieve a lot, tick off items on your bucket list without paying the tax man a penny, and yet you'd still have quite a lot of assets left at the end. Retirement planning should consider different phases of retirement. The first phase would be when you're living off of ISAs and potentially some tax-free cash from pensions, and this can be the time when you're ticking off items on your bucket list and spending a bit more money. Second phase would kick in when all your defined benefit pensions are available, the state pension is available as well, and that would help to offset some of the income tax you're probably now paying. And then the final phase would be possibly when you're 80, you're taking things a bit more slowly, doing less with your life, spending less money. And when you plan in this way, you can make your money last a lot further and get a greater understanding of your true needs in retirement. To start the retirement planning process in 2024, simply just keep track of where you currently are now. So list out all your assets, your ISA, your pensions, what your state pension is worth, savings you have in things like premium bonds. Then look at all your liabilities, loans you have, mortgage you have. Then look at your expenditure and where all your money's going. So now you have a good snapshot of your finances, and you can read a book like Millionaire Next Door, which will give you a good overview of how truly financially successful people manage their money. One interesting thing to look at is the percent of your wealth that's in your home. And ideally, this should be between maybe a third and a half. So if your home is worth 500,000, you could have up to 1 million in assets that are actually earning you money rather than in something that's costing you money. So this potentially means that if you live in London, you might want to retire to a cheaper area to free up cash that can then be invested and make you money in retirement. The next thing to do to start the retirement planning process in 2024 is to get a strategic plan for your savings and investments. And specifically, you want to automate this. So it could be salary sacrifice into a workplace pension, or it could be direct debits into your own ISA or your own personal pension. And you need to plan out how much money you might need in an ISA if you plan to retire before you can access any of your personal pensions. And when you've got the right plan and you've considered the tax efficiency of that plan and make sure that the plan can cover any gaps in your needs in retirement, then you're much better set up to have confidence in what's going on with your finances. You also want to look at where your money is invested and specifically your exposure to bonds. If you watch the program Dragon's Den, you'll note that they always want a stake in equity in the businesses. They never say, well, I'll offer you this kind of loan and you pay me 5% above the Bank of England base rate. They never do anything like that. So the way to truly build wealth is to have a large proportion, not necessarily all of your money, when you're accumulating wealth, put it into equities and into the best quality companies in the world in well-balanced funds rather than taking the risk of trying to pick individual stocks on your own, which is time consuming and potentially can be quite catastrophic to your wealth. Now you want to work on developing passions and hobbies that you can monetize. And there's a great book called From Strength to Strength that looks at how you can build on the strengths that you've gained through your education and through your work and transferring those over to a new business venture later on in life. The more I think about it, the more I realize that true wealth is in your mindset rather than your bank balance. Once you've got the belief that you can do anything and ultimately you'll be successful, then you realize that you don't have to follow corporate life anymore. You can break free, just do things on your own, and maybe some initial ventures will fail, but ultimately you'll find something that brings you enjoyment and a little bit of income. So now you put all this together into a retirement calculator spreadsheet. And I feel this is the best solution because it's got transparency in terms of what's going on and flexibility as well in terms of covering all of your inputs. It maps out your wealth over time, both in today's money and in real purchasing power terms. It looks at how you draw your income, makes sure you're doing it in the most tax efficient way. It models your tax over time and it can highlight when you're, for example, paying a 40% tax rate. You can model different stock market return scenarios to look at the potential sequence of returns risk. And you can play around with different sensitivities to see what best suits you. So next up, I recommend you look at some retirement planning case studies, which give you an excellent overview of how people undertake retirement planning, or you can look at this other video, which shows a retirement calculator in more depth.